Hello, everyone. Welcome to the last press conference of this Web Summit. We have with us the co-founder and CEO of Sandbox, Sebastien Borget, and Alien World's co-founder and CEO, Sarojini McKenna. I believe you have prepared remarks. So once those are done, I believe we're using this as more of a informal conversation. So feel free if you want to come up further, that's fine as well. If you want to stay there, that's okay. I'll hand out mics at the end of the statement, and you just put your hand up, where you're from, what's your name, and we're going to take questions from there, if that's okay? Yeah, brilliant. So over to you. There's a button on the mic that you just have to press once, and it'll turn on.
Okay, cool. Is it on? Yeah, okay, cool. Hi everyone, Sarojini McKenna, co-founder and CEO of Alien Worlds, and Sebastien. So we're delighted to be announcing that the Open Metaverse Alliance for Web3 is open to membership, which allows members to vote and participate in working groups. So we're here at Europe's largest tech conference and one of the largest global convergences of many levels of tech, from startups through to the tech giants that have defined the last era of the internet. In fact, many of you will have noticed that this is the first year at Web Summit that Web3 has had such a massive and growing presence, and this is indicative of a sea change in user tastes. So users who are increasingly demanding more and more control over their experiences, more and more direct ownership of their identities and their assets as they interact with applications, games, and other services. So of course, where users go, we as creators follow. And so we're announcing this week that membership is open at OMA3. And in the last few days since membership has been open, we have had applications rolling in. We now have 50 creator members who have signed up. The decentralized metaverses and platforms who are the founder members of OMA3 first came together through informal discussions, and then we announced in Paris in July at the Metaverse Summit, I think that you were co-sponsors of, that we were formally coming together to form an interoperability and coordination group. And since then, so since July, we have established an association in Zug, so a legal entity in Zug. We've formally constituted the board, and we are open to membership. So what is OMA3? For those of you who haven't been following this story to date, we hope you'll continue to. OMA3 is the Open Metaverse Alliance for Web3. It's a consortium, or in Switzerland, an association established by some of the largest user-owned metaverses and platforms. So OMA3 is a not-for-profit Swiss association, and we are supporting, promoting, protecting, and standardizing open collaboration for metaverses and the surrounding ecosystems that they exist in to foster interoperability, standardization, and ownership. So OMA3 will produce technical standards, open source code, documentation on best practices, and external advocacy and ecosystem liaison to support that purpose. I'm happy to keep going with a bit of a statement unless you want to interject. Yeah?
Well, I think it's, thank you, Sarah. We are two people here physically present to make this announcement, but really there's a large grouping of us that contribute to this press release and that statement. So maybe we can start naming all the founding members of the OMA3.
Yep.
As it's a large group of some of the most significant Web3 decentralized virtual world, and we want to make sure they are properly credited, of course.
Yeah, for sure. So the founding members who are on the board are Animoca Brands, Alien Worlds, Dapper Labs, Metaverse, Space Metaverse, Superworld, the Sandbox, Upland, Voxels, Unstoppable Domains, and Wivity is providing support to the consortium. So those are the founder members, and we've also had over 50 companies that have signed up in the last few days since we've opened membership. So far, membership is open to companies, but we really aspire to make membership available to individuals and even other types of decentralized organizations like DAOs in the future. Okay, so perhaps it's worth touching on before, I mean, we're gonna like throw this open and happy to chat through some of these concepts, but useful perhaps to baseline on, why it's important to have an open metaverse alliance for Web3, right? So what is the open metaverse? Why is it important? So fundamentally, the open metaverse is where users are at the core of the construction of the platform and the application. So users control their identity, their account. When they interact and they earn assets or they own assets, those are held immutably within an account that they own. And that's that provable ownership, both of their identity, but also of their assets, and then later on, potentially the community that they sit within as a DAO. The fact that that's provably owned by them makes them co-owners of the platform. And this then gives them a lot of power, but also a lot of stake in the system, allows them to contribute to how that system develops and creates really the rapid growth that we've seen within this type of open and blockchain metaverse to date. And why then did we feel the need to come together to coordinate? So, I mean, when considering creating a consortium or a group that would standardize certain technical standards, we have to also consider the fact that standardization too soon can actually limit creativity and limit innovation. But we felt that this was the point of inflection in the industry when it was time to come together to standardize both technical aspects, but also the broader ecosystem and legal topics and so on. And the reason for that is that by creating standards, we coming together can impact the broader conversation around standards. So for example, with the MSF, the Metaverse Standards Forum, which I think we can touch on further, but also so that grassroots creators within our metaverses are creating technology that can be composable into the larger platforms that they're part of. And that's really significant to be able to bring in all of the developers within the space. So Sebastien, do you want to talk a little bit more about that coordination? And
I think definitely the thing is Web3 is in its very nature, and it's still very nascent as a space. It's quite fragmented if you look at all the different projects and communities in place. And surprisingly, when a certain number of the larger actors in the sector wanted to touch on the topic, we've been I think I was the first one surprised that no single Web3 company were represented through that initiative. I don't know if it was intended or not by our mission or just because we were too small for them, but it reflects an issue, which is we don't have a voice. And while we're trying to build the future of the internet through user ownership, we don't have a voice or a say at that. We felt like it would be more strategic to first of all, coordinate among ourselves to speak as one voice and be with this mantra that together we're stronger, and then collaborate with the other bodies and other standard forums towards having the same weight, the same capacity at the table to express all the interests of the members for the OMA 3. Whereas we don't have the same size of companies and the typical funding members from those bodies.
Mm-hmm. And it's gratifying that since the formation of OMA 3, the Metaverse Standards Forum, which includes many of the largest companies in the sort of metaverse space, so not decentralized metaverses like us, it's been gratifying that they have now extended. So MSF issued a statement saying that the Metaverse Standards Forum extends a warm welcome to OMA 3 as a new principal member. We share a vision to encourage collaboration and coordination to enable an open and inclusive metaverse. So OMA 3 is now a member of MSF, and MSF will be becoming a member of OMA 3. And so in that way, I think it's fairly significant that MSF, that represents many of the sort of Web 2 iterations of the metaverse, and us representing the Web 3 iterations of the metaverse, are working together. This is because many of the kind of technical standards that will be implemented at both bodies. If we can achieve standardization across them, then our users will be able to benefit from, being able to port between all of those metaverses. So it might be worth just quickly touching on the 4 working groups that we've established. So membership is open, and at the creator member level, and what that means is that people will be able to join, the creators will be able to join those working groups. And the 4 working groups are the asset transfer working group. So that's talking about, or that will be defining standards to allow the porting of assets, so that's NFTs and identities, so accounts between different metaverses. That requires technical interoperability because many of these NFTs and accounts are on different blockchains in different environments, and so we require technology that allows them to be bridged, and also standards for how, once an asset is bridged, it can be recognized and understood within the destination environment.
And even beyond, it's not just about the volumetric representation of an asset from one platform to another that matters. It's also carrying it with you, everything that makes your identity, the history,
Exactly.
all the experience you have accumulated through the use of that asset into one place to not be suddenly forgotten as you arrive in another place with it.
Right, exactly. So the asset transfer working group will be specifying metadata for describing the assets, and it's in that metadata that many of those that information would be held, that would then be relevant for that asset to be understood within the destination environment.
Mm-hmm.
The second working group is the portaling and mapping working group. So this is developing solutions that allow the creation of two-way portals so that users and their avatars can port between metaverses at the sort of visual level. So whereas the first working group was looking at the actual asset level and identities and accounts, the second one is looking at the file formats and the standards around the spatial information that needs to be conveyed to represent various components of a person's identity within the metaverse across different metaverse environments. So that's the portaling and mapping working group. So that will be talking about the two-way passing of spatial information, discovery and indexing of experiences and related solutions, and standards around APIs with respect to that, universal scene descriptors, and file formats. The third working group is the legal working group. So this one will be looking at protection and fair use of IP in this context, which is a fairly live topic. Developing standards or providing some frameworks for understanding data protection and GDPR considerations in this context, examining topics of liability in decentralized environments, and also just being aware of the overall regulatory environment as it evolves. And then the ecosystem working group, which will be specifically working with the other partners in the space like MSF and other venues that are working on these topics and providing advocacy. So we'd like now to throw it open and have a conversation about what we've been introducing you to today. Hi.
So you talk about standardization across metaverses, how are you going to quantify success for the OMA3? Is it like a statistical target, or is it, how are you going to know the success?
So it's a very relevant question. First of all, thank you, and thank you everyone for being present to this announcement. You can quantify the success in 2 ways. First of all, it's the number of technical paper that will be officially published from the effort of all the members and contribution, and going through the different stage of review until it's a final approval for a relevant document that can be published online and hopefully implemented across many other world beyond the members. It's important. And second is definitely having the market and consumer adoption. At the end of the day, it all boils down to what the user experience will be, and we hope that we, by contributing to define the technical standards, at the end of the day, users will seamlessly benefit from that effective interoperability, and that can be measured in a number of avatars that effectively move from one world to another, as an example.
Yeah,
Yes.
we can hear you.
Yes.
Thank you very much for your question. I'm Philip from South Korea, and One thing is that the interoperability and standardization on fragmented metaverse is really important for being uh, one metaverse. Do you have any plan to go with Roblox or Gepetto by Neighbor? And that's my first question. And my second question will be a little bit tough. Well, as you know that Meta is performing really bad, and as you know that among the big tech companies, their stock went down mostly due to their big investment in metaverse. So how will you deal with this winter with your new technology? That's my second question. Thank you.
Do you want to take the first one?
Sure. So the intent is not necessarily to partner with one particular world, such as Roblox or Zepeto, but to work on standards. And Roblox is a member of the Metaverse Standard Forum. I have to check if Zepeto is as well, but provide like the technical documentation that could facilitate indeed that the user-generated content present on Roblox or Zepeto could be interpreted both in centralized worlds using Web 2 technology or within the Web 3 one. That will boil down to several of the working group that we've listed, and it will go much beyond just like file formats, which is one of the core topic that they are only discussing at the moment.
And then around, sort of the performance of Meta, for example, I think that, one of the reasons why we want to work with the large participants in the space that are centralized platforms is because I think that, we're defining a category together. This is brand new technology, and users are experiencing a new way of engaging with the internet, in which they, are engaging with other users within metaverse environments, buying and selling from each other, creating content for each other, and so on. And so whether that person is doing it within Meta or the Sandbox or Alien Worlds, this is a new way of users interacting with each other. And so I think that it's in our interests that Meta is successful, and I think it's also in their interests that that our vision, that users' tastes, which are growing in the direction of greater control and ownership of their assets, find a coordinated voice and the ability to be put forward within the industry as a whole, because that is where users are going. And so we want to pave the way for that and to make it as successful as possible. I'm not going to comment on the specific performance of Meta, but I think that, we wish them well, and I do think that we're definitely flying the flag for decentralized technology and communities that allow users to be co-owners. What I've experienced with Alien Worlds is that our users are massively creative and incredibly excited about being entrepreneurs and creators within our metaverse. I know that your participants as well are incredibly creative, produce their own content, their own assets, their own games. When you can evangelize all of your users to co-create with you, we have found so far a model for success. So we're experiencing success in that model. We invite Web 2 platforms to embrace the pathway forward of user-owned content and identities, which we think is ultimately where users' tastes are headed.
Working? Yeah, thank you. First of all, thank you for being here. And my question is regarding MICA, the European regulation regarding NFT and all the ecosystem. Have you had a word on that, or were you consulted? And if not, what will be your project? Because you have a work group on legal, so that's my question.
I think nobody has been consulted about MICA, and has been a challenge which has generated a certain coalition of actors in Web3 in France, but I know in other countries as well. Not related to OMA3, because OMA3 has been formed, I think, later on, from like when MICA was voted and implemented, and is in the process of being implemented. However, like what has been shown is like two things. First, like regulators should actually work with existing industry actors and organizations such as OMA3 to listen and better understand what the industry actors are doing and need for them to create like a very fertile ground for a job and build the future of internet. And the second is like we still have, thankfully, we still have the ability to have amendment being made, so like the regulation, at least in Europe, is at least has been defining a little bit more clarity around like NFT in the context of gaming. Still some blurry points there that we will continue to iterate and work with the regulators.
Yeah, exactly. So the working group that's been constituted to look at topics like that, will over time, we've just formed that working group, but will over time be looking, to impact the wider conversation around these topics. I think it's, what I understand from inside some of the conversations that have been having amongst European regulators, they're also aware of the fact that Europe has yet to see as many unicorns, for example, as other parts of the world. And, it's really significant when designing regulation to bear the interests of the citizens in mind, that employment and prosperity, comes from a regulatory framework that is right-sized and well drafted so as to promote innovation, employment, and the furthering of technology. Portugal here, where we are in Lisbon, decided to take certain policies that were a little bit more friendly to certain types of technology, and I think has experienced a boom from that, and we see that regulation really can impact local economies in a really beneficial way, and we would like to continue to work with European and global regulators to ensure the prosperity of their citizens as we build this next Web3 iteration, which anyone can participate in as long as they're open to it.
My question is, you have now a trajectory. It's not too much time, but is the sufficient time to have learned which business, which cases of use are really functioning in the metaverse? This is what interests me. What would you have learned in this time about your experience with the companies and the users that are in metaverse, and how your mind has changed in this time, and what you see for the future about beginning from what you have learned. What do you see in the future?
If I can rephrase the question, you're asking like what's our learning so far within the 4 or 5 years of Web3 technology that we've been working with. Well, the first thing, like, it's definitely obvious, is like when you empower users, anyone to become creator, and that value goes back to them, like you're building the fertile ground for like very successful ecosystem to exist. I think like building it upon like natively a blockchain technology is much easier. And so far, like we talk a lot about blockchain and NFT, but I haven't seen any other technology yet that provide the level of trust and transparency that is required to have no single actor be able to take control of the content from the users or replace information and be able to delete it, moderate it in ways that are not appropriate. And we've seen that like today, like this conference is a great example, because over 4 years, like if you've been to Web Summit year after year, I don't know like how it was a year or 2 years ago with Web3, but how it is today, we could call it the Web3 Summit, in my opinion. Like it's definitely shown a strong migration and progressively like understanding. So users want it, entrepreneur wants it, and there's still a certain part of the industry that require more education to fully understand what is the meaning of it, and we're playing a role into that education, and we need to keep going on further. Like it's not a transition that will happen overnight. We know it. We know that Web 2 will not die suddenly. Like it will keep existing maybe for 10 more years, but there was a decline in the growth, in the user, in the attractivity from the core employees that they want to hire. Like Web3 companies enjoy a lot more attractivity for the talent. And when you bring all those elements together, the users, the talent who contribute to build those companies, like where the best energy is and the value goes, I feel like all of that is meaningful to shape the next version of the internet. That's what everyone is wondering around, not necessarily where we all have the answers yet. And it's important that even the work of it's important to understand that even the work that we're doing at OMA 3 will see the result of it not in a matter of weeks or months, probably more in years, but it has to start at some point. And the earlier, the better.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. And I think the other thing I would say about what we've learned is how powerful a large evangelized user base is. So, you know, a single platform trying to build could not have covered the ground that we have done in the last couple of years. It was us plus all of our users who wanted to contribute to the ecosystems that they were in, create things, make money, meet other people, socialize. All of that human energy has been part of the success story to date of blockchain gaming and the decentralized metaverse that we're representing. And that rapid growth has been made possible by the fact that users are co-owners of the system. This is a little bit of a mental kind of leap for centralized platforms to make because they're used to owning proprietary systems and monetizing as much as they can that position of incumbency and proprietorship of a platform. The business models in Web3 are different, as is the technology. And so that's really the learning for me, is that this is something fairly radically different because of its different technical construction that then leads to a different type of user and different transactional flows and business models that arise from that.
Thank you. I have two questions. So from the first question, more of a market perspective question. Sandbox has been like the pioneer brand in the metaverse. And interestingly, we are in interesting times where we're seeing the economy moving towards stagflation, hyperinflation, and the fact that a lot of global brands are laying off. We recall that just yesterday, Twitter said they were reducing about 3,700 employees. What are your plans to stay relevant in this bear market? First question. Second question is that, Meta, that's Facebook, the stock has depreciated by 70% this year, and that's because investors see metaverse as more as a flop rather than the future, and that's the punishing. So how do you try to attract funds in this ecosystem? Then on the regulation side, the CFTC and the Security Exchange Commission have a debate between securitizing mostly the metaverse tokens, NFTs, and rather leaving things like Ethereum, Bitcoin on the commodity side. That gives you much more compliance and restriction. How would that hamper on innovation? Thank you very much.
All right. Lot of questions here. So let me break it down. But first of all, Sandbox is not the only pioneer that's been in the space of blockchain and Web3. I think almost all the founding members from the OMA 3 started in 2017. That include Somnium Space, Decentraland, Alien World in 2018. So all of us have been contributing towards growing the space, and that's why also we've known each other for some time. We've seen that we share the same common goal and intention into building this decentralized and open metaverse, and that's why today it's important to reiterate that it's not just Sandbox or Alien Worlds because we are physically here that we're talking, but it's the group of all those companies that are talking in front of you. I don't want to detail too much because the topic of this conference is not about Sandbox. I will try to make super short answers to the first one.
So there was a question around how are we growing through the bear market?
Exactly. So the metaverse is both a technological and social disruption. We know it's going to happen. There's no more questioning about it. It's probably going to take a decade, probably more to fully come to fruition. We're into like the early days of it, and Sandbox has a very much growing ecosystem of builders, agencies, creators on top of it. We have a growing number of brands who are entering the space. So every time a brand, a celebrity, a community choose Web3 over Web2, the signal they send is like, we want to stop giving up our data to our like centralized world, giving up our capacity to connect to our user, and we want to stop paying those platforms for then being able to reach out to our own users in a way. So give us back control, and that's very important. We also have like a growing number of users and engagement, which shows like this is not related to market cycles. Generally speaking, it's not only crypto or meta that is down on the financial market. Netflix is down, Apple is down, Tesla is down. So there's a general correction happening over tech, but tech will still remain among us and can only keep growing in the way we use and we socialize on a day-to-day basis. So I'm confident that that will not be tech will come back. I cannot predict anything related to price or value. Towards meta, I think like the correction is not necessarily meaningful towards the overall metaverse strategy. It's also probably meaningful more like to the investments that's been made onto a certain type of technology and a certain vision of the metaverse that's being pushed versus the rest of the revenue and business model of the company that private investors have decided to bet against.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. And then around the regulation point, this is the type of these conversations are ongoing in the U.S. And we certainly note that there is a strong current of opinion of believing also that certain incumbent players would prefer that regulation is not implemented until they're ready to take advantage of whatever regulatory environment ends up being implemented. And in fact, one of the reasons why I got into this space in the first place was that I understood that the power of decentralization was to disrupt incumbency. But unfortunately, when incumbents have the ability to lobby regulators, then you can have a situation in which there isn't really a level playing field. We're looking forward to more clarity around regulation because then everyone can work towards complying with it. But again, we would hope that puts users first, makes sense at a fundamental level and ultimately is clear, which has not been the case in the US so far, or has been less the case. And so, we're looking forward to that being clarified.
And one thing I'd like to add is also we are all very entrepreneurial. And we don't wait regulation to come to define like how we are going to iterate and bring to life certain ideas we have. Like we just built, and usually regulation tend to come afterwards. It's quite a unique time that we're living in, as regulation are catching up much faster than they used to do on certain topics, which is not necessarily a bad thing, but it's important to keep an open channel of communication so that those regulations are indeed, again, not going to kill a nascent ecosystem and favor like the previous one that's been in place, but they are going to enable like a more free
innovation.
Innovation, exactly. Yeah. Sorry, I was looking for my word in English. Yes.
Any other questions? No? Okay. Thank you so much for your time. Thank you all for coming. And yeah, that's the last press conference of Web Summit. We'll see you around again soon.
Thank you very much.
Thanks so much, everyone.
Thank you.